Chancellor will not extend furlough, but there will be an alternative scheme. Are you clear at this stage how that might work? And is it something that you think goes far enough?
Well, we're not clear at this stage exactly how it will work. I asked for the Chancellor to come as a matter of urgency to Parliament after there were rumours there might be change here. He is now going to be in Parliament this afternoon, so obviously I'll be pressing him on the details of this scheme. Now, I have asked 40 times for a wage support scheme. My party has been asking for that for many months now. We've lost valuable time in showing that would be an element of the future package. We really needed it, actually, to be there so that businesses could plan, knowing that they would have that support. So, obviously, if it's coming, I'm pleased, but there will be other issues. Well, I know there are other issues around training, around support for businesses, where the Chancellor really can't afford to act so slowly.
At the moment, the furlough scheme's still in place. We know it's coming to an end. So they will argue that they've still offered businesses, they've still offered companies, still offered security to them in allowing them to maintain those members of staff. And actually, as it's coming to an end, this is the next raft of options that they are giving that's going to hopefully allow them to support those workers, but equally manage the economy, which is buckling so considerably.
Well, you're right. The economy is buckling, unfortunately. We're seeing in the UK the deepest recession in the G7. And actually, we need government to have a longer view. It needs to be focused on giving businesses confidence that they can keep staff on. Now, yes, you're absolutely right. The full furlough scheme is ending at the end of October. But really what we needed, and, you know, I've been calling for this, as I said, I've done it 40 times. Back in May, I was saying that government need to look at this. They need to be providing more certainty to businesses so that they know what the support system is going to look like, so they can plan, so they can have the confidence to keep people on, because that's what's so important now, keeping people in work wherever possible.
The new measures announced by Boris Johnson, which are likely to last for 6 months, include the 10 p.m. curfew on the hospitality trade. What impact do you think that is going to have on the industry? We've heard a number of representatives of that industry absolutely furious on the airwaves recently, criticising Boris Johnson. How many jobs do you think are at risk? And for those people who don't understand why a 10 p.m. curfew threatens the industry, what do you understand the impact is going to be?
It's my understanding that actually, in many cases, a number of venues would be taking quite a lot of their income after that 10 p.m. cut-off. And of course, it's 10 p.m. when the facility's got to close, not just when it needs to stop serving people. But look, we believe that one of the major problems we've had throughout this crisis has been a lack of clear communication. And we've made very clear, if the government believes that different measures are justified by the public health evidence, then we are not going to criticise them. We don't want to add to the kind of confusion that we've seen over the last few months. We want to have clarity. We want to make sure that when government has decided on particular restrictions, that everybody understands what they are.
Well, it's interesting that you make that point, because over in Wales, the First Minister has just adjusted that rule so that it won't be a 10 p.m. cut-off, everyone out. It'll be a 10 p.m. last orders and then a more relaxed sort of getting rid of people at the end of the evening. That's a confusing picture in itself, isn't it?
Well, I have said a number of times, wherever it's possible for particularly the UK government to have early talks with the devolved governments to try and make sure that there's a clear understanding right across the UK of what restrictions are, and obviously, if possible, to have the same restrictions, that really is preferable. Equally, we are in a situation where devolved governments can go their own way. That is their constitutional right. So, you know, I'd never criticise them for doing that, but where we can have that coordination, it really is much better.
Do you feel that the government hasn't gone far enough when it comes to the mixing of households? We have different rules here in England as they have in the devolved governments. There was Professor Peter Openshaw, who's one of the SAGE members, talking on the radio saying, I think if we wait 2 or 3 weeks, it will be too late to introduce this idea of actually mixing of the households. And the government has been naive to think that we should be allowed people from 6 different households, potentially, if there's only one of each, can still come together. Would you rather they had been stricter, like they have in the devolved governments, and said, do you know what, stick to your own household?
Well, as I said, we as the opposition party, the Labour Party, we're not going to be trying to cause confusion by, criticising existing rules, suggesting that they should be changed. However, what we really do need, I think, in the UK context and indeed for England is much more clarity about the evidence driving different decisions. Keir Starmer, our party leader, he, in fact, when the announcement was made by Boris Johnson, made exactly that point. And he said, look, if you can provide the evidence driving these different decisions, there will be more support for them. There'll be more trust in them. So we would call on government to be much more open around this, treat people like adults. And we found overwhelmingly that people do follow those rules, but they need to know the justification for them.
Anneliese Dodds, how are we going to pay for everything? And when, do you think?
Well, right now, the UK, as with many other countries, is in a low interest rate environment. That means it's possible to cope with the debt increasing during this period. Obviously, that may not stay the case forever, but for as long as we're in this situation, the really critical thing to do is to try and preserve economic activity, try and keep people in jobs, try and get people quickly back into jobs who've become unemployed, and try and stop businesses from going to the wall. When we do that, we actually protect the tax base for the future.
Rishi Sunak, the Chancellor, has already said, hasn't he, he can't protect everybody's job. We're going to have to face a bigger social security budget. People are going to have to be supported. We've already had a multi-billion-pound furlough scheme. Somebody's got to pay the bill at the end of the day, haven't they? I mean, is it going to be tax rises, and when do you think those might come in?
Well, somebody will eventually have to contribute. Obviously, that's the case. However, right now, as I said, the really critical thing to do is to try and stop that tax base getting smaller, because it's all very well talking about, which taxes might be imposed into the future. If there are fewer people in work, if there are fewer businesses operating, then, we can have that hypothetical conversation about taxation, but there'll be less there to tax in the first place. So the really critical thing for government to do, and I've urged them to focus on this. Yes, we will have those discussions, I'm sure, about tax into the future. But right now, we've got to preserve economic activity. There's much more that needs to be done from government. They need to be learning more from what other countries are doing that are successful in this regard. They need to be bringing forward training funding, much more that they can do to try and make sure that our economy is getting back to firing on all four cylinders.
It'll be interesting to see what Rishi Sunak says a little bit later on today. One of the things that they are very keen to do to keep the economy going, to keep people going back to work, keep them in their workplaces or schools and stuff, is the release of the NHS app, which has launched today. I wonder whether you've downloaded it onto your phone yet.
Goodness, it's a little bit early. Well, I will look at it very carefully, obviously, and if it has been released, then obviously if it's part of the test, trace and isolate system, of course I will download it. We think actually around the test, trace and isolate system, we need openness from government about what's going wrong. We know there are big bottlenecks around testing in particular. Let's get them sorted out. Let's get this fixed, because actually not having that test, trace and isolate system working effectively is one of the biggest drags on economic activity, very obviously, because it threatens additional restrictions, even beyond the existing ones being imposed into the future.
Do you understand? We've got lots of people getting in touch with us today, trying to download the app, talking about whether they will, saying that, do you know what, they don't trust the government. What the government's done so far hasn't given them any sense of comfort and confidence that this app will work and they won't just take their data. Do you understand people's concerns with that? And what would you say to them to encourage them? Because it seems like an app like this could be one of the keys to actually trying to keep things going.
Well, look, this is a national effort. And in fact, an app has been promised for many months. There have been a number of abortive attempts, as I understand it, to introduce one. We do need to have one. We do know that it works in other countries. And I would really encourage people actually to take part in this. It's very, very important, just as with all of the other measures that have been put in place. But we need central government to step up as well, particularly around dealing with those real bottlenecks that I mentioned in the testing system. It's not the case that these weren't foreseen. We knew that they were coming. Let's be open about the problems and get them fixed as quickly as possible.